Alright guys, so this is just going to be a brief overview of what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be doing it. We're going to be using this Have I Been Pwned website to find out if passwords that we enter have been pawned or leaked in a data breach, I guess is a better way to put it. These guys have an API that we can use, which is here. And we're going to be using their free tier, which is their version 2, and this is the address that we're going to be hitting. So we're going to be sending data up to this and then getting a response back. So when we're using Python and we're using the command line, what we need to do is kind of turn that into a web browser. It's still going to be text-based, but there's a library called requests, which we can use, and it's right here, and I'm going to leave the links to all this stuff in the notes, right? So at the GitHub page, I should say, and then you can take a look at this stuff for yourself. So the way this works is when we hit this API, what we need to do is send them a hexadecimal version of our password. You're going to hit it at this address, but then you're going to pass in, it says here, first 5 hash characters. So let's go over here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. The way they do it is they use this SHA1, SHA1. So if I put in, for example, password, it could be any text, like any gibberish, right? And I say hash, I get this string back, this hexadecimal string. If I put in Steve, I get this. And the thing is that I'm always going to get this. This is always going to be the result. If I put in password, so just remember, starts 9CE5. So if I put in password, I get that. I'll go back to my Steve. I get the 9, this string here. Now, the reason they want the first 5 is they're using something called k-anonymity. And I'll leave the link to this in the notes as well, and you can read up about it. I'm definitely not an expert on this at all. So if you want to dig more into what this is all about, you can. From what I understand, this is pretty standard. The reason for this is you don't want to send your full password across the wire. So let's say my password is Steve, for example. Well, as soon as I put that into an API or something like that, hackers may be able to get it. But if I only send the first 5 characters of a hexadecimal generated string, then it's going to be a lot harder for them to know what my original text password was. So that's the idea behind this. We're not going to be coming over here and generating passwords. I guess you could, but what we're going to be doing is using a library that comes with Python called Hashlib, and it's going to allow us to enter a password, and then we're going to generate that hexadecimal string. We're going to get something that looks like similar to this, and then we can send that up to API, get a response, and then what we're going to do is compare the response to what we have locally, and then we'll be able to say, this password has been hacked or publicized in the past, or no, you're good to go, sort of idea. That's the plan here. The idea also is that I want to run through kind of like how I would hack this together at first. So I'm not going to start with like, let's write a function and put this in and, this is what we're going to get back. I want to kind of show you the steps that I take to get this working and then make it pretty afterwards. On this free course here at Udemy, I'm just going to be doing the command line interface version, but I will also provide a link to the YouTube channel where I actually use the same code in a Flask app. So you can actually enter this stuff online. We deploy it to a Ubuntu server, and you can actually enter the stuff and get feedback right on the web page. Pretty cool. Anyway, in the next video, let's get started with some code. All right, guys, see you in a sec. Thanks. everybody, welcome back. So I'm using Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to show you how to set up a virtual environment. When we run Python projects, it's pretty much standard practice to run everything inside a virtual environment. So what we're going to do here is Visual Studio gives us the option to just set this up right in here without running any commands in the command line, is what I mean down here in the terminal. So you could, open the terminal up and you can run commands to do that. But I'll show you how you can do it here. And if you want to set it up another way, you can always do a quick Google search. There's lots of tutorials on how to do this. In Visual Studio Code, you hit Control-Shift and then the P all at the same time. And then what you want to do is either search for or find this create environment here. And then what we want to do is select this VENV, okay? And then here, it's going to ask us enter interpreter path. So this is from our Windows machine. I'm on Windows, and I'm going to select that. That's where Python's installed. And then we select that, and you can see over here, it's setting everything up for us. You can also see here on the left, there's a folder .venv, so that's our virtual environment. While that's going along there, I'm going to make a new file here, and I'm just going to call this file pwned.py. It could be any name, right? You could call it main or whatever. I'm just going to call it that. So this seems to be good to go. Now, in VS Code, in this environment here, sometimes if you just hit enter, no, it didn't work for me. I was going to say it usually sets it up. Maybe it's over here. I've got a couple of these open. So I actually have to activate it. So yours may be activated. I'm going to run a new terminal here and see if it kicks it off. There we go. To do this on Windows, I'll show you how to activate it here. So to deactivate it, when you see this .venv over here in parentheses, that means we're running in that environment right now. But to deactivate that and go back to just your Windows machine, you just type in deactivate. Like that, and then you can see that's gone, and it just says the C drive. To reactivate it, now on Mac, I'm not 100% sure. I usually use like Ubuntu, and to do it on, it's probably the same command, so I'll show you on probably on Mac and then but on Linux how you would activate this environment. So this isn't going to work on Windows, but you would say source and then the name of the folder. So you would say .venv/bin/activate. Like that, and press enter. It's not going to work here. I think on Windows you just do .venv scripts activate, and that's how you get it going again. And so we're good to go there. We got that set up. Now that we're in here again, what we want to do is in our file up here, we got to import a couple of things. We talked about this in the previous video, and we're going to import requests. That's going to allow us to interact with the outside internet. And then we also want to import Hashlib. It's going to allow us to turn our text password into that hexadecimal value, that string of numbers and characters. All right. So we got those both imported. Now requests needs to be installed. So again, make sure you're in your VENV. I'm just going to move this up, and what we're going to do to install that is just do pip install, and that's requests. Like that. And I was just noticing up here, we need to make this requests. Like that. Now that we got that set, we're going to come back. We're going to start interacting with our API. We'll see you in a sec, guys. Thanks. Hey, everybody. All right. So I was showing you in the intro video that to grab the API, we need to go to this address. So this is from their documentation, right? And I'm going to just comment that out for now. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to go over here to the requests, and I'm just going to grab all this here. It's just for reference, really, so we can see what we can do, what methods we can do to our URL. Right, so they've got an example here. They're saying, r equals requests.get, and they're getting a URL, and then they're passing in some parameters, authorization parameters, I suppose, which is cool. We don't need that. Well, I'm going to comment this out as well, and we're going to set this up pretty much like this. I just want to do it a little more, I guess, verbose, you would call it. So I'm going to set the URL up first. So I'm going to say URL, and that's going to equal, so we're setting this to a variable, and we want it to be this right here, right? And then we also want this to be inside of quotations, so it's a string. And right now we don't want this. We're going to be adding that later, but so we've got the URL, and then to get some interaction happening with it, we're going to do this request.get here. We can set up another variable. I'll say API response is going to equal to requests.get, and then we want to get the URL, so we can just pass in our variable and we're good to go here. And when you're typing this in, right, you can see they've got keyword arguments, so they actually have one here. So I get URL, and you can see it's giving me a hint here. So I can say URL equals, and in our case, it would be URL, because that's what we called it here. So if we called this John, then we would be URL equals John, okay? And then let's print out some info here. So we can go print, because we want to see what's going on. And then what do we want to print? We want to print that variable above. So API response. And if we look at their documentation here, we can actually get codes back from them. If we get a response, a good response, it'll be 200. That means there was information sent across the wires. Or if we don't get a response back, we'll probably get like a 400 here. So let's try that out. So status code. So we can do response.status code. And if we run this file, you can see we get 400 because we're not passing in a proper URL here. You remember that it takes the first 5 characters of that SHA1. So we can make something up here, right? We could just do, let's try that out and see if we get a 200 now at least. We still get a 400. Let's try, maybe because that's not valid. Let's try this here. SHA1 online. I'll put in Steve, and I'll grab the first 5 here. And we'll move those, paste that in, make sure there's no space, run that. There we go, we got a 200. So I guess you can't make something up. I'm assuming there's some kind of value here of that it's looking for, right? Some kind of pattern, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So we've got that, and we can come up here, right, and we can put in user password, and we can set that to a string. And I always use Steve. I'll just use that again here. And then we can't pass Steve in down here yet, but we come back, what we're going to do is we're going to get going with the Hashlib library and get this set up so it gets transformed into that hexadecimal value, that string. And then we'll separate the stuff out so we can pass it into our URL here. All right, guys, we'll see you in a sec. We're going to get this Hashlib thing going here so we can take our password and switch it over to that text hexadecimal thingamajiggy, hex digest. So let's do that here by grabbing, what we're going to do is grab this here and go back to our Python and paste it in up here. Now we're going to want to take the output of this and input it here into our URL. So just make sure that this is above, because as you probably know, Python file starts at the top and goes to the bottom when it's reading it. What we can do to check this out is let's just do SHA-1, because that's what we need. And let's assign this to some kind of variable. So we'll call this pass to Hashlib. And then set that equals to that. And if we print this, let's see what we get. We get this right here. Cool. Now, we want to be able to take this, though, and pass it in here. And this is a binary string, so we're not going to be able to do that with this B. This has to be an F string. So I'll show you what we got to do. Let's try, for example, I'm just going to use Steve here, and we get the 9CE5. And if we go back here, you can see 9CE5, so it's working. That's what we expected. And then, but like I was saying, we want to pass this in, and the way we need to do that is with curly braces and then variable name. And I just noticed that I forgot an S here or left it out or whatever. And you can see that, you know, this isn't highlighting, right? It's not working. So if I change this to an F string, now you can see it's turned white and it's all good, but this isn't going to work. So if I run this again, you can see we get this error, and it's saying type error, strings must be encoded before hashing. There's a method called encode. So right after the quote here, that closes out that F string, we can pass in a dot encode like that. And then if we run this again, you can see we get our data back. We also probably want to upcase this. Let me show you here. So I don't think we ran this before, but if we come down here, we're getting this response code, but we can also get text, right? So we can see down here in our notes that we copied, they're calling r.text. In our case, our R is this API underscore response. So we can just call text on this and run this again. And you can see we're getting back all these strings, and then there's a colon and then a number, which is the number of times there's been a breach, I guess, for this tail here. So this is the tail of, it doesn't include the first 5. So I'll show you in a second what I'm talking about. Let me just grab one of these here. And I'm going to put it, where will I put it? I'll put it here. And I'm going to just surround this by quotes like this. And then what we can do is, that'll be fine. I'll just leave that like that for right now and put a comment there. Just comment it out. So, and we'll work on that in a second. So what we need to do now is we're getting our, I'll roll down here again. I want to comment this out here too. We don't want to return all that stuff right now. What we need to do though is from this is get the first 5 characters and then the remainder of the string as well. So this would be a representation of the remainder of the string that we just got, but then the first 5 we have to pass in right here, right? So let's run this again. I was going to show you something. Yeah. So when we return ours from the Hashlib library, we're getting it back as lowercase, right? So all the letters are in lowercase, and you can see theirs are all in uppercase. And we're going to be comparing our strings, so we probably want to uppercase ours as well. And we can just come to the end of that line and just add on here the dot upper method like that. And if we run it again, you can see now we get the uppercase version. Now, to get the first 5 of this is pretty straight ahead. I'm just going to copy that, and I'll come down here. We can make up a variable here. I'll call it first 5. We'll call this Hashlib, I guess. And that's going to equal this variable. Well, not exactly. We're going to slice it. But then we want to also grab the remainder, right? So everything from 5 onwards. So we get something like this here. So we can compare. We'll call this 5 to end Hashlib. You can call these whatever you want, guys. So 5 to end, and then we just want to do some slicing on this. So all we got to do is put in a pair of square brackets like that. To get the first 5 characters, we're going to be counting from 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's the way these work. They start at 0. We want to do 0, or we don't have to put anything in, and then we put a colon in, and we'll go up to 5. Because when we do this, it doesn't actually include 5. So you would think we're grabbing 6 if you counted 0, because 0 up to 5 is 6. But the way this works is 5 is not included. So then we want to do the same thing over here, but the other way. We want to go from 5 colon and then leave it blank, because we want to just grab everything up to where that string ends, so we don't have to put anything in there. It's down here, and then in here we'll print out the first 5, and then in here we'll do the 5 to end Hashlib, and let's run this. There we go. There's our pass to Hashlib, which is right here. First 5, right here, and then 5 to end, right here. Okay, now we can actually take the first 5 and then pass that in right here. But as you can see, that's just text. We actually need to put that in the squiggly curlies, and we have to turn this into an F string. So just before the quotes, just put the letter F, lowercase f. Boom. So now, let's see what we get back when we run this now. So we're going to print that. And there we go. We can see that we're getting some data back, right? So I'm passing in Steve. Let me try to pass in something like Steve AAAAADDD, something crazy like that. This probably never been hacked or released, or somebody's never used that as an actual password, right? Let's try that. And you can see, we're still getting some stuff back. Because, yeah, of course we're going to. That my idea is not actually going to work. I wanted to see if we could get... So when we put this in a for loop and we filter and we compare, then we won't get that back. But yeah, all right, never mind my little experiment here. So what this is returning, I think I said before, is the last remaining part of the string and then the number of times it's been breached. So for example, we've got this here, which we grabbed before. And what we can do is print, and then I'm going to take that string and put it in there. I mean, we could count these, but I'm just going to do in here len for length. Actually, we want that string inside there, like that. So we've got the print function, then we've got this length, and then let's see what we get here. Let's not print that out. So we get 35 characters. Now, what is the length of the 5 to end? So in order to find that out, all we got to do is put in here len, and then wrap that in another set of parentheses, or parentheses. I'm not sure the way to say that. Parentheses. Let's run that. And we get 35 and 35. So you can see this is what I was talking about. These are the tails. All right. And all right, guys, when we come back, the next thing we got to do is just get the number of times that there was a breach, if there was, which is here, right? All these numbers. And then compare our 5 to end and can see if it appears in the list that we get back from the API. So if there's a match, then what we're going to do is say, hey, this password has been breached before, and give the number of times it's been breached, and say something like, this is probably not a good idea to use this password. That's what we're going to do next. See you in a sec. Hey everybody. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to iterate over this. Well, really it's the text, right? So this API _ response dot text, and we want to split the location where that colon is. So we have the number, and then we have the string of letters and digits, right? But we want them to be two separate things. So what we can do here is, I'm just going to come down here somewhere. So we can say for line, this could be any variable, I'll just call it line, in API response.text. What do we want to do? Well, we want to turn this into a list, and we want to have those items separate. So we can say line dot split. I think I said strip before. If I did, I meant split. We want to split on that colon, right? So we're going to split on the colon, and we can actually set this to a variable here. Call this new line equals that. And we don't actually have to do that even. What we can do here is, it doesn't matter, it's just I'm thinking we could combine this all into like a one-liner, is what I'm thinking. Let's do, set up a list here. So we're going to call this API response list, and we're going to set that to an empty list, right? And then what we can do is we can say API response list dot append, and then what do we want to append to our empty list is the new line, right? The split new line. So new line. So what we're doing is we're appending this to this empty list here. And then we can print the API response list now, because that's what we've created here. Now when we run this, this is what we get. Take a second. So what it's doing is it's splitting out each character. That's not what we want, right? We don't want that. Like I assume this last one here is the actual count that we want. It's after the comma, right? So the solution for this is to set this. There's a method called split lines. And so we can say line splitter equals that, and then dot split lines like that. And then now, instead of iterating over this text deal, we're going to iterate over the line splitter variable that we just created. So for line in line splitter, we're going to do the same exact thing. Make the new list and all that jazz. So let's run this now. There we go. So we can see we've got like a list inside a list, that's fine, but we've got this separate number after the comma. So we've got basically this information at location, let's say for example 0, and then our index 0, and this would be at like index 1. All right, now what we can do, we've got that. We need to compare this information to the 5 to end. So we can say, come down here, make another for loop. We can say is 4, and we can call the first one hexadecimal. It doesn't matter, just be hex, and then we could say count in where we want to look in API response list. And then what we can do, just for a sanity check, is print hexd. And we could put a comma there and put the count, but let's do it on another line. Print, and we'll do count. Let's run this. Let's not print this anymore. And then see what we get. Check it out. So we've got a count and we've got our string of hex. Now to check, let's go up here. What do we call this again? We can say 5 to end hashlib. If hex d in 5 to end hashlib, what we're going to do is we're going to return, or this isn't a function, we're going to print the count, and we're getting that up here, and we can also print 5 to end if we want. Let's run this. Now, what we're doing here is we've got a loop here, and then we've got another loop here. I know you know that, but it's inside of this loop, right? So that's why we're able to call the count, because it's aware of what that is from this for loop up here. Let's run this. And I don't want to print this anymore. I that down there. Let's run it again. I'm going to get rid of this. And then also this one here. And then, so yeah, we didn't get any return. I was like freaking out a bit because I'm like, why is that not? It's because our password is so strong. So if I put in just my normal Steve password, which a lot of people have used, check this out. Now, there we go. So we can find that this password has been breached 44,094 times, and there's, the Hashlib. We don't really need that, but what we can do now is say fstring quotation, put that in the old squiggly roos, and we can say this password appears in some count data breaches. Let's run that again. Okay. Let's try this instead of this password. Let's say the password, and then now pass in their password. So user password, this is what we're using. So we'll put the old curly braces, squiggly brackets, and we'll say user password. And we'll move that over and then do this. The password Steve appears in 4494 data breaches. Data breaches. Okay. Cool. Now, what if it doesn't appear? What do we want to do then? Well, we want to print something out. Well, for now, we'll print something out, but we don't want to, we can't return anything here because we're not in a function. So I'm just going to paste that there. Let me make this strong again. So I'll just put a bunch of D's there. Run this because it's printing this out, right? So let's just test the test password. Okay. The password appears to be good to go. Rock and roll. All right. All right, cool, guys. So we're pretty much done with, well, we got done with this part of it. We've got everything working. Now we just got to make this more organized. This is nuts. We've got print statements and comments and all kinds of stuff going on here. That's just crazy. So we're going to separate this out into a few different functions, and then we can eventually take that and port it into any app we want. All right, guys. See you in a sec. Thanks.
Hey everybody, so I wanted to come back and just explain what's going on with our print statement, if there's any confusion. So what I'm going to do is grab everything from our file here. And I'm just going to make a new file. I just don't want to mess this one up. So new file, I'll call this loopexplainer.py. Paste that in. So let's run this here. We'll get started with this. And we're getting the good to go rock and roll. Now, if I put in here, instead of good to go rock and roll, I'll put that count back in here. And this is what we were seeing when we were testing this out. Let's try that. So we get this 1, right? This is what we were seeing. What's going on is we're sending up the first 5 of our hashed password. So Hashlib is taking this, as we know, turning it into that hexadecimal hashed string of characters. It's sending it up to the API, and the API is getting back and saying, here's all the results. Now, there are going to be some false positives because we don't care about just the first 5. We care about matching that tail to the tail that comes back from the API. The results that come back contain many results that don't actually match the tail, right? And so that's what's going on there. And I'll show you down here. I hope this will help it make more sense. By doing this, it's almost like doing an if else. And then what this is doing right now is just returning the first result of the else. If we actually put an else in here, and maybe some of you have tried this, I'm not sure, but we'll do else colon, and then what we got to do is move that over to indent it properly. We'll run this now. So check it out. We're getting a whole bunch of results. So I'm going to try my best to roll up here. Yeah, so this isn't getting a hit, right? So it's not doing anything. It's not returning anything, printing anything. Now, if we change this back to Steve, you can see we get all those results. There we go. So we got our first print here, but then we also get all this other stuff. These are matches on the first 5, okay? But we're not getting the hex D match. So the comparison hex D, the first 5, all right? So that's what's going on. I hope it makes sense. And then just play around with this if you're, there's no harm in doing that. So I'll actually leave it with the else, and then I'll send that up to GitHub. I'll leave it like that. But we just move that outside of the loop to get the last result. The other thing we may want to do here, guys, is set up a requirements.txt. And what that is just, we don't have many things installed here. We've got, just one thing, the request library. But in case we want to use this app 5 years from now and use that specific version, because we don't know we don't have that memorized, obviously. What we can do is just do, for example, now if we type in pip freeze, we get a list of the stuff we have installed in our environment. And you can see this is requirements and these other libraries that probably have something to do with requirements. They were installed as part of that library. Now, to add a requirements here, I'll show you. It's pretty simple. If you've never done this, so you say pip freeze, and then greater than, and then what we're going to do is just simply put in requirements.txt. Press enter, and boom, bada bing, we get this requirements file. Open it up, you can see it's got our stuff in here. All right, guys. I wanted to show you that because if you visit the GitHub page, you're going to see that requirements.txt, and you're probably like, where did that come from? That's where it comes from. All right. Thanks so much.
All right, everybody, we're on the home stretch now. I've got these files split side by side. So this is our function file over here on the right. And all we got to do is grab these 3 lines here and move them over to the prep, right? Paste that in, tab those over. So that's done. Now we still have to work on some stuff here, but for right now, it's done. Next, we're going to call the API. Do these three things here. Why not? Tab, tab, tab. And then, of course, the check and filter is the last thing we worked on, which is this stuff here. And then we want to, we can delete that line, but what we want to do here is tab all this stuff over as well, like so. So as we're going along here, I want you to just keep in mind that in this last function, we need to grab the user's password, like the password that they typed in, that text anymore, but we want to show it to them again. And then we're calling our first function here, right? That get user input. So all these other functions, really, we need to call them, but we can call them from the previous function. So I'll show you what I mean here. So we're getting the user input, we're getting the output, okay? So that's cool. We want to prep now our, let me close the pond here. So here we want to pass in a variable. It could be X, it could be anything we want, it could be, whatever we want, right? But let's make up a name of pass text. And then what we can do is, in order to get it into here, I'm just going to copy this, right? And up here, instead of printing now, we could still print, but we can actually return, right? So I can say return, and then put that function there. Of course, we don't need the colon on the end. What we're going to pass into it is the password, right? We're going to pass this variable in to our function, to this function. So we're calling the function, and here's where it lives. And this pass text, like I said, this could be any variable, right? Any name is going to be this, right? So Steve in this case. So we're passing that down, and then here, instead of this user password now, we got to change this to pass text. So this here is getting sent down here, and then we're good to go. Now let's try to print. Let's just test this out. Pass our print pass to Hashlib. Let's see if we get a response here back. So I'm going to clear, and I'm going to run this file. Click the play button. I'm going to enter Steve, and look, we get that back, which is coming from right here. So I'll comment that out, and if I run that again, enter a password, I'll put in Steve, and we get nothing back because we didn't print it. The next thing we want to do is we got to take this information and get it down here. So we can do the same exact thing. We can take this function, we can return, put that there, but now we got to think, what data do we want? Like, we've got some other stuff to think about down here. What do we want to pass from here into this? Well, we talked about a minute ago that we want the user password, right? The actual text that the user types in. Here we got to add those variables. So I'll say here the user text, the user pass, and then we also need all of these things as well, like the 5 to end, all this stuff. We can do 5 to E. It doesn't matter what these are called. F5 for the first 5. I'm just trying to come up with silly names so you know that it doesn't matter what they're called. So we've got those two, and then we want the full password text. So we'll do full HD for hexadecimal, I guess. All right, so we've got these 4 things coming in. I'm going to show you something kind of cool here. So there's arguments, and then there's keyword arguments. So this could get confusing, right? Because these are different names than these. And so what we can do up here is we can assign these to like a keyword argument setup, so we have a better idea what's going on. The other reason you want to do this sometimes is because order does matter, right? The order, like if I pass in, the first thing I pass in is pass to Hashlib, then it's going to assume that this is the pass to Hashlib when it's actually expecting the user password, right? Anyway, what we can do is we can say the user pass. You can see that the editor is already, it's intelligent, right? So it's showing me that you can set this to an equal, so a keyword argument. So I'll do that. I'm going to put a comma in. We're going to set these up in a second. We're going to do the next one is 5 to E. The next one, F5. And like I said, we're doing these in order, but it doesn't have to be. And so now we just got to set up what they equal to. So the pass is the full HD. The first 5 is F5. Oops, we want to be up here. F5. The 5 to end is F2E, or 5 to E. And the user pass is the pass text, right? The user pass is just this, the pass text, right? And then you can clean this up a bit by just move these down so things are a little more readable. That works. Now let's try printing print API response. Let's just see if we get some output here. So we're not printing anything anywhere else. We've commented out those print functions. Let's run this. Enter a password, Joe. And first 5 Hashlib, we got a little problem. It's not defined. Right here. First 5 Hashlib is now, this is going to be F5, right? Sorry guys, F5. There we go. Let's run this again. Jimmy, and we get a response 200. Okay, so we know this is working. Let's take that out of there. And what are we going to do? We want to do similar stuff here. So we're going to do text password. We're going to do API split. We're going to do, call this full hex. All right, so the line splitter is, this is going to be API split. this is going to be 5 to end. We called that F2E. User password is going to be text password. And I think we're good there. We don't really need the full hex, I don't think. Yeah, let's actually remove that. We don't need it. I'll take it out. And then up here, we're going to say that equals something. This equals something. And this equals something. That's going to equal the user pass. The API split is going to be the line splitter. And the F2E is going to be the 5 to end is called 5 2E. Like that. And then I want to make sure we're not printing anything. Yeah, let's, we got to actually say return. And then return that. And then down here, we don't have to do anything. I feel like I'm forgetting something. All right, let's try to let's try to run this and see what we get. Enter a password. All right, so we're getting print statements. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you what we can do here. Let's take this and we'll print it, but we'll also return it, which will end the function, right? That's what the return will just, yeah, the rest won't run. And then down here, we'll do the same thing. So after the print, we'll return, because like I said, the return will stop it. So return, and then we'll return this here. So print, return, print, return. Let's see if we run this now. Oh, wow. I can't believe that wasn't used before. Let's try Steve again. See if we get, no, this is not this. Yeah, it's the indentation, right? I think. Let me try this here, guys. I'm sorry. There we go. Password. Okay. Let's try Steve with a bunch of D's and a few F's, like that. All right. Working. Good to go. So you can see how important indentation is, right? So that's what was going on there. All right, so we've called our main function. We can get rid of these prints and stuff and get rid of that. And move that up. Put 2 lines in between each of these. Get rid of that. Just try to format this a little nicer. There we go, guys. So we're rocking and rolling. So, like I said, if you want to continue on with me, I'm going to take this and we're going to put it into a Flask app. So it's going to be a very simple one-page Flask app, very, very straight ahead. But it'll allow users to actually type in the password into a browser, submit it, and then we're going to get the response back displayed in the browser. Make sure to check out the YouTube. All right, guys, thanks a lot, and I appreciate it so much.